My Region Network. I'm your host, Taylor Hart, and today I'm sitting down with Felisa Rogers, the editor in chief of MJ Brand Insights. And I'm super excited just to have another editor, another writer, somebody as passionate about the written word as I am, because I've just been writing pretty much my whole life, not necessarily in a professional manner, but just throughout everything creatively, um, academically. I've written a lot of papers that I really enjoyed. And so I'm excited to talk to you about it. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I love talking to other writers. Like it can be a solitary craft, so it's always fun to be able to, talk trade with people, and
Yeah.
also, of course, talk weed with people.
Yes. Also, one of my favorite things to talk about is weed. But yeah, so you are a writer. You've been writing for quite a while now. Was that something that you always were kind of drawn to, or did your passion for writing kind of develop over the years, or maybe through schooling and stuff like that?
Oh, I was obsessed with writing pretty much from day one. I was a reader. I was one of those kids that would go to the library and get as many books as I could possibly check out and read them all in a week. And I always wanted to be a writer. My parents were travel writers, so I sort of grew up like around writers and in the publishing world.
That's kind of cool, though. Get it from your parents. I know your parents also were growers, which is kind of
Yes.
a cool dichotomy to have growing up. How was that for you growing up in that kind of world?
I mean, on the one hand, it gave us a lot of freedom. You know, my parents were always around,
Yeah.
and so there was that, but it was disconcerting to grow up in the grow world during the 80s when it was so incredibly dangerous. And so, we were always getting these like speeches from our parents about I went to public school. I was always like, okay, well, you know that Nancy Reagan is a huge liar and there's nothing wrong with weed and you can't tell anybody what we actually do.
Interesting.
So that part of it was interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and then, my dad was actually busted when I was a kid. So
Man. Damn. That is always kind of heartbreaking to hear. You know what I mean? Anytime anybody, especially when they have a family, um, gets busted, it's a bummer. It's a bummer to hear about. Did you actually like help around the farm? Did you were you a part of that at all, or were you just kind of aware of it?
well, I definitely thought that I was helping around the farm. I remember like feeling very like I had my own like little trim scissors and I would sit and like we were a really small operation. So it was just
Yeah.
like my parents and like maybe a couple of friends, and I would sit and trim with them. And I
Yeah.
had these little gold scissors. And I remember thinking that I was being really helpful, but I can only imagine like what I was actually contributing.
They were giving you the already trimmed stuff, like the already like what they trimmed off of the plant, and they were like, "Here, just trim this up, just do a little cut here, you know." What you give
Probably.
to the kids to make them feel like they're helping. That's cute though. I definitely I cherish those moments where you can work with family and help, even if it's not really in like a full capacity of working. So I like the fact that you got to kind of grow up in that environment, even with a lot of a lot of the negative aspects of what was happening at that time and everything. Still think it's kind of cool and kind of made you who you are today. You know what I mean? So that's rad. When you were growing, though, you were working in both in California and Oregon. What I was reading about when you were yourself growing in the gray market times. And now, what years was that you were actually growing yourself?
Um, yeah, I was mainly working on farms. So that was, I think, starting in like 2007, probably.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
up until maybe 5 years ago.
Oh wow, so as recent as that. That's cool. So when you were working in those on those farms and whatnot, which experience in which state did you like better? Like, what was each one of them like? Did you have a preference between the two, or what were like the kind of differences between the two states at that time in the market?
That's a really good question. When I was working in Oregon, I was working here in Western Oregon where I live. And the scene here in Western, like central Western Oregon, has always been much more sort of restrained and reserved
Hmm.
than it is further south. I would say like more like low key and secretive. And
Okay.
there's both like positives and negatives to that.
Yeah.
So I kind of liked the low key vibe of working for people in Oregon, as opposed to working in Humboldt, where that was like during the rush and things were really going off, and there was this kind of like baller mentality among some people that could
Yeah.
be like a little over the top and obnoxious, and there was a certain sector of people in Humboldt, and this certainly does not apply to everybody. There's at all, but there was a sector of people that were just being very cavalier about the whole thing, like on an environmental level. And there was a lot of money. And it just, I don't know, like that scene, some aspects of it really weren't my scene.
Yeah.
But I actually ended up working in Sonoma County for many years for
Yeah.
some good friends of mine who had a family farm. And that was super chill. They just had a
Yeah.
beautiful farm and their family was there. And like we always ate really good food and they treated their workers really well. And so like those were like probably like my happiest years working in the industry on the
Yeah.
grow side.
That sounds lovely, honestly. In a picturesque area like Sonoma, that sounds
Oh, it was gorgeous. Yeah, we would go
yeah.
skiing after work and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So what was your favorite part about like growing or the grow like within the process of growing or even just like you were just talking about that environment of being in, like what was your favorite aspect of it?
Well, in terms of the actual growing itself, I always really liked just taking care of the plants, the pruning and sort of guiding the plants. That was always satisfying, if you could just go in and kind of like open up the airflow and, get rid of some of the larf and just kind of make it um, more beautiful and more healthy. And then in terms of culturally, it was a really culturally rich time period because so many people that were working in the industry, like both growers and, seasonal workers, there's just like a lot of creatives who were using the work as a way to supplement like their other businesses. Like my grower friends all had their own kind of like creative or culinary businesses. And my friends who were like trimmers and workers were usually there to kind of like supplement whatever they were doing, which was like music or photography or
Mhm.
making some kind of a craft. And so I don't know, like you usually ended up like working with very cool people. I mean, sometimes you'd end up working with really annoying people, which is, always at risk. But in general, I felt like I loved the way that the like gray market and black market industry like fueled so much of the creativity in the Northwest and sort of
Yeah.
allowed people to like pursue these other endeavors in addition to weed, which is what I
Yeah.
was doing.
Yeah, I love that. Did you have a favorite strain to grow at all?
Well, as somebody who trimmed a lot of weed, I was always interested in growing strains that would weigh up nicely.
Yes.
So my favorite strain there was a strain called Blackberry Soda, which was just like beautiful. It was
Yeah.
so pretty and purple and blue, and it would also just like had like a heaviness to it. Like it made really big buds that were super easy to trim. So I was always excited when we were working with that.
That's awesome. The efficiency of it all, you know? I'm about that efficiency. So if you can grow a bud to just be naturally nice and weighty and hefty and doesn't need much to showcase itself, that's beautiful. I love that. Now, you were saying that you were pursuing other interests while you were growing. At that point in time, what else did you have on the side? What were you working towards outside of the cannabis industry?
So I was working to build a freelance career as a journalist. And, I saw my work in weed at that time as like a means to an end, and although there was these aspects that I loved about it, I wasn't an owner. So I was a worker. And so I didn't really get to enjoy either the creative side of being a grower, a manufacturer, or the money that people were making at the time, like,
Yeah,
on a large scale. Like, I made money, but I didn't make the kind of money that people were making in 2007, like before the prices started to fall. So
right.
to me, I was just like, okay, I'm just doing this until I can get my feet off the ground to really be like a real writer. And I managed to do that. It got to a point where had enough of a career as a writer that it was more lucrative to me than working on farms. And I
Yeah.
was really psyched. And then I realized that I was picking up weed writing jobs, um, because I had that expertise and I lived in
Yeah.
the Northwest. And so it was just very ironic to me. Like I had spent a few years being like, I'm going to get out of the weed industry. And, here I am 10 years later and I'm really entrenched in the
Yeah.
also writing and editing. So
So mixing the passions together, I think that is a nice balance of it, and more heavily on what you wanted to pursue, being writing. Um, I find when I write about topics that I know really well, my writing is always, always, always better, just because I simply know more about the topic that I'm writing about and I like care more about it. So do you find that your writing in cannabis is sometimes like, do you like what you write about in cannabis, or is it more, I don't know how I'm trying to pose this question, but like do you have other topics of interest that you enjoy writing about more than writing about cannabis?
At this point, I don't know if I would say that was true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at one point, I still love to write about it. I was very passionate about. I grew up partially in Mexico, and I
Mm-hmm.
have written a lot about tequila and mezcal, and
Yeah.
that was a passion of mine for a long time, and it still is. And when I first started writing about cannabis, I wasn't necessarily as interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
But because it wasn't exotic to me, it was something I grew up around and it was something that
Right.
I'd always had to do. So it didn't have like kind of the same glamour.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten deeper into covering the regulated industry, and we still do some coverage of the unregulated industry, but I have really like opened up to I'm so fascinated. Like the deeper you get, the more interesting it gets. And
Mm-hmm.
I've realized that the things that fascinated me about writing about mezcal, I was writing about rural producers who were
Oh,
bringing these like artisanal traditions and, trying to survive in the modern market. And, that is my favorite thing to write about in cannabis too,
yeah.
is, like these small businesses, whether they're rural or urban, bringing like generational knowledge and, trying to create a product and survive and compete against like larger entities. And so I think that I've found stories in cannabis that I now am super passionate about writing about it.
That's amazing. It's always good to be able to overcome that feeling of like, this is work. You know what I mean? It's nice to be able to overcome that and be able to turn it into something that you can thoroughly enjoy. Because for me, getting into writing, getting into cannabis, and I'm really heavy in the music space as well. Um, there's some days where it's hard work and it feels like that, but there's it's also just like I wouldn't have it any other way because I really enjoy doing it. So it's nice when you can overcome that kind of feeling and turn it into more back into a passion kind of a thing. So love to hear that. Do you have a memorable piece or maybe a couple of different pieces, or even like a time in your writing career that you that is like one of your favorites, or you just always like reflect on, or if somebody wants to see your writing, do you have a go-to piece that you show them?
Well, actually, it was really cool because before I took this job building MJBI, I was doing freelancing, and I was doing some writing for The Guardian, which
Mhm.
was very cool, of course, and they're great people to work for. And when I took a full-time job, I was thinking about it and going like, am I ready to like step away from this, mainstream journalism that I've built, like worked so hard to get to? But since I've been writing for MJBI, they've like asked me to write a couple of cannabis things. So that was really cool. And I got to write this story called My Life in Weed that was sort of like a personal essay about growing up in the industry for them. So that was fun.
Yeah.
Um, when I worked for Salon, I used to write a culinary column. And so I did this food history series. That's a long time ago at this point. So I read some of them and I'm like, oh, but in general, that was a great time as a writer.
Yeah.
But I definitely love right now because I'm given a great deal of freedom to
Mhm.
choose the topics that we cover. And so even the stories that I'm not writing myself, it's neat to have the freedom to kind of survey the industry and pick and choose, where to go with our storytelling.
Yeah, that's super fun. That's what I love. Shout out Mitch, shout out Joey here at Respect My Region. They put a lot of trust in me and have over the years in order to write and cover certain things that I just find that I enjoy, that I like, that I think other people should know about, kind of a thing. And I've really helped make an impact in other people's lives through being able to tell their story. And so I just really love having that freedom to be able to do so. So shout out any company that has full faith in their employees and the people that they bring into the team, in order to be able to do what they think is best, because that's really truly how I feel like people shine. So major props to you, because what y'all have built is super insightful. It's I know that at Respect My Region, we look to y'all for information and news stories all the time, to see what's going on. So it's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about MJ Brand Insights, and how you got started, how you were approached, and how did you meet the JJs?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, and that's awesome, and I'm so glad that you're experiencing that same like creative freedom working for Respect My Region. We love you guys too, and I just love the authenticity that you bring to the issues. So, and I couldn't agree more that like giving people like the freedom to like explore what they really want to talk about, I think is such a smart thing to do as a publisher.
Yes.
I try to do that with the writers who work with me too, because I feel like you get such a different caliber of work when you're sort of respecting somebody's, you know, mind and where it will take them.
Yeah. I
Um,
hear that.
MJBI, yeah. So I was doing some blogging for this company called Grassworks out of
Mhm.
Seattle a long time ago. And the guy that I worked for was really cool. We had a cool working relationship, and he knew the JJs and recommended me when they were looking for somebody to start the publication arm of their business. So for people who don't know, they are the founders of MJ Unpacked, which is a show for industry professionals, cannabis industry. And they wanted me to build a publication that was complementary to MJ Unpacked and what they were doing. And so it originally started out as a slightly different project than what we have going now. It was
Mhm.
going to be more like BevNet for weed. So a lot of like list style articles and, like more news stories. And we do both of those things still. And, our list articles are really popular, of course, because people love to read lists and don't have
They
long
sure do.
but, they've given me a lot of creative freedom. And, we've kind of taken it in a more, we do more in-depth reporting and like longer stories, brand profiles on brand owners, and, just issues in the industry. So it's been very cool to build it from scratch and to be trusted to kind of, cover the stories that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, and
that's
I guess I should say, like, once I met them, we just totally hit it off. They're extremely fun, idiosyncratic, weird, interesting people. And, I just felt immediately comfortable around them both. And I know everybody says like our team's like a family, but it does have that vibe. We have a lot of fun together, and we just joke around a lot as a team. So,
well, it's so important though. And I think as cliche as it is, I think if everybody could say that their like their work group was like a family to them, then I feel like we would have a lot better conditions for workers, because not a lot of people do have that feeling to them. And when you spend so many hours, so much of our time, especially nowadays, so many people have to work more than just 40 hours a week, that if you don't have that environment, like how are you going to even possibly put in your best work? How are you going to put your best foot forward? So as corny as it sounds to say it, I'm all for work environments that feel more like a family, that feel more welcoming and inviting, because I just feel like it produces such better work that way. And I really hope that that's the future of pushing forward. You're not always going to get along with everybody, but like I don't get along with everybody in my family anyway, so same environment, same dynamic. So I think that's wonderful to hear, and it clearly shows with what y'all have built out, and the amount of passion and effort that gets put into things. And so I just really want to highlight that really fast. But given the fact that you write about a lot of things and just look through and analyze, what's going on in the world of cannabis and whatnot, I kind of just want to hear some of your thoughts on the future of what cannabis is looking right now. They're having so many discussions, about whether decriminalize things, whether deschedule it, like what's going to happen. So I kind of want to hear what you have to think about it right now, in the direction that they're going, or where you want it to go, or how are you feeling about things right now?
well, I don't really have any hot takes on when descheduling or legalization is going to happen, or exactly what it's going to look like. I mean, I
Mhm.
follow it like I think most people in this industry do, but
Yeah.
I don't think I have like a lot of original insight into that. But I would say that in my experience, I've been like monitoring, state legislation for
Yeah.
8 years or something at this point. And with that experience, like, I would say that I can almost guarantee that whatever we end up with is going to be fucked up.
Yep.
And
Okay.
then, obviously, I see a huge positive on an ethical level for federal legalization,
Yeah.
and I think it's extremely important that we get people out of prison, and
Yeah.
that it's really truly a ridiculous situation, but especially now that we have so many states where it's a big business. Um,
Mhm.
but I do think that, there's gonna be quite a dust up when that legislation eventually passes. And, um, I I personally, and this is my personal opinion, I'm not speaking as a representative of JH Media, although some of the people there might think the same thing. Um,
Yeah.
I'm personally concerned for, small businesses in
Yeah.
state industries. I think as interstate commerce becomes legal and it becomes so much easier for MSOs those to expand,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see a lot of small businesses disappear and be unable to compete, and they're already having a hard enough time as it is.
Yeah.
So, I definitely see both the positives and the negatives of these changes. On a more positive side, I was just reading about the Small and Homestead Independent Producers Act. Have you
Mm-hmm.
have you been following that at all?
I have not, no.
So it's Jared Huffman out of California and Earl Blumenauer out of Oregon, and they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to pass legislation that would help small scale cultivators sell across state lines directly to consumers, I believe.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right. I mean, whether it's going to get anywhere is another question.
Right.
But I think it's really encouraging that there are lawmakers that are thinking about this at all, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
it shows me that a more thoughtful approach to like industry problems that, politicians at a higher level are coming up with legislation and being concerned about these small operators like in advance of legalization.
Yeah.
And so I guess as somebody who's been following legislation for a long time, I am encouraged by the way that, for example, newer states entering the regulated market are obviously learning from the mistakes of states like California and Oregon and Washington,
Yep.
and trying to create smarter legislation
Yeah.
and creating, more equitable, more room at the table. And I do see that happening. And I guess that's heartening considering like how in general, this industry is like extremely troubled and has a lot of
Yeah.
problems.
Oh, yes. I mean, Washington itself is, I feel like we're just stuck in a time capsule of 2014 era cannabis policies right now. And like the
Totally.
the way that the market is just so crazy. And I mean, a lot of the things happening in other states, I'm just like at this point, like I'm starting to get really jealous. And I used to be the one like, haha, I'm in Washington, like legal weed is everywhere. And then now I'm like, oh my God, you can go out to a lounge and you can go smoke somewhere. Like it's technically illegal for me to like smoke anywhere basically out here. And it's just like we're so behind the times that we need to push forward. I did see that Washington is opening up some and distributing out some licenses to people that have been previously like arrested, have felony charges, anything related to any of that. They're trying to give back to some of those people by allowing them to have licenses and apply for a license through this program. So I don't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. I wish that I did. I do not follow legislations like this that much. Or news stories. I try and keep up with it. But editing for Respect My Region, I do get to read about a lot of it too. So that's really nice. But I'm really hoping that some of these things pass and go through and actually get implemented, and that we can work towards a national market at some point. Like I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that would feel like. I don't know what that world looks like, but hopefully someday it's treated more nonchalantly like alcohol. And because I mean, like alcohol is super poisonous for your body, whereas cannabis is not. So I hope one day that we have a world to where, I can consume cannabis like people go out and consume alcohol, and not have to worry about these things. So that's my hope for the future.
Yeah,
What?
I'm with you there. And I'm also with you with the slight jealousy of living in a state that, legalized pretty early on. And now you're seeing
Yeah,
all these cool programs happening in New York, for example.
yeah,
Whereas in Oregon, we're still really fighting hard to get like any kind of equity legislation because
right.
it wasn't written into the original law. And it's been, an uphill battle.
Yeah,
And so, yeah,
yeah.
it's a mixed bag. But
Do
yes, I
you?
too would like to be able to walk into a consumption lounge and enjoy a joint.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, that would be beautiful. Do you think that there's a state right now that is like the front runner as far as like what it should look like and how we should be treating things?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly. I think New York is looking pretty good,
Hmm.
but we haven't really seen like the market develop there yet. So it's
Right.
sometimes hard to I'm not, I'm on the West Coast, so I'm not intimately connected with that industry.
Right. Yeah.
So it's hard to see, like where the problems are going to develop. But right now, I would say New York is looking good. Like I would say that most of the positive stuff is going on in like Eastern states right now,
Yeah.
and that the West Coast is really struggling to, deal with things that were written into our original legislation that basically like makes no sense and was written by
Yeah.
people who did not know anything about weed or how it's grown
100%.
or, you know.
How people consume it either. Like the edible laws in Washington, for instance, are super whack. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. I 100% agree with that there. So yeah, it's crazy that we're at a point to where the West Coast, which is known for weed and smoking weed and consuming it all the time, is now the ones who are behind the times and struggling to keep up, while the East Coast just manages to make things happen. So,
Well, as a native Oregonian, I still think we have the best weed.
yes, I will say that will never change. That part will never change. Is that you can't take that out of bloodlines, out of the soil out here, is the fact that the weed out here is just better. I don't care if your laws are better. I don't care what's going on. Our weed smokes better. What a beautiful place to leave off on right there. Do you have any last minute thoughts or anything that you want to leave our viewers with as we move? Oh, one thing I forgot to even bring up is the MJ Unpacked at the end of the month. So I guess that's one thing that we can leave the people with, is MJ Unpacked down in Vegas. Was it the 28th to the 30th, I do believe were the dates?
Yeah, it's the 28th to the 30th, and I am super excited. I mean, this
Mhm.
is a very like genuine, authentic event, and the caliber of people who are there, it's just, off the hook. So many interesting conversations, so many interesting panels. Like we're really addressing like a lot of key issues in the industry. And I this is the third live one I've been to, and every time I just make so many amazing connections with, people who are super dialed in. So
Yeah.
I am very excited to go there and talk to people and gather intelligence and, you know, find new stories.
Yes, super exciting. So yeah, other than that though, do you have anything that you want to wrap up with and leave the people with?
No, I'm happy leaving it with, like, the supremacy of Northwestern weed and how great Massachusetts is
Yes.
gonna be. Those are 2 messages I can get behind.
Yes, me too. So thank y'all for watching Higher Women Podcast with me, Taylor Hart from Respect My Region. We have our North American Weed Tour going on from now until the end of the year. December 15th, I believe, is the last day that we will be running things. So continue to watch, continue to tune in with me every Thursday at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. And then next week, I will be back with another guest for another wonderful conversation about weed. So thank y'all for joining, and I will talk with y'all later. And thank you for joining me as well today. I really, truly appreciate our conversation today. So
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you,
it.
Taylor. I'm gonna be following your stories.
Yes, follow me. I post a lot of random things about cannabis, music, and just my life living in Seattle here. So, if y'all want to follow me, it's all down at the bottom of the screen for you. We got a bunch of handles down there, and you can follow all of us. And there's a couple of websites for you to go check out in the description as well. So you can just continue to learn more and more about the cannabis industry and join us in learning about the cannabis industry every day. So, appreciate y'all, and we'll see you next week.